When you hear the words Anglican Church, what comes to mind? Perhaps the grandeur of Canterbury Cathedral, the solemnity of royal weddings, or the distinctive Book of Common Prayer. But have you ever stopped to wonder who actually gave the Anglican Church its name? The answer, as with most historical questions, is far more complex and fascinating than you might imagine. Today, we embark on a journey through time, a journey that will take us from the Roman occupation of Britain through the tumultuous years of the Protestant Reformation to the reign of one of England's most controversial monarchs. This is not simply a story about a name, it's a story about identity, power, politics, and the birth of a church that would eventually span the globe, influencing hundreds of millions of people. The Anglican Church, known in England as the Church of England, stands as one of the most significant religious institutions in Christian history. But unlike many churches that bear the name of their founder or a defining doctrine, the Anglican Church's name tells a different story, one rooted in geography, language, and national identity. So who gave it this name? Was it a king, an archbishop, a scholar, or perhaps it emerged organically from the people themselves? The answer requires us to look beyond a single person or moment and examine the rich tapestry of English history itself. To understand where the name Anglican comes from, we must first journey back to the 5th and 6th centuries, more than 1,000 years before the Anglican Church as we know it would officially emerge. The story begins not with Christianity, but with conquest and migration. Picture the landscape. Roman Britain is crumbling. The legions have withdrawn, leaving the island vulnerable. Into this power vacuum came waves of Germanic tribes, the Saxons, the Jutes, and most importantly for our story, the Angles. The Angles were a Germanic people who originated from the Amgeln Peninsula, located in what is now the border region between Germany and Denmark. When these tribes began settling in the eastern and northern parts of Britain, they brought with them not just their warriors and families, but their language, culture, and eventually their name. The Venerable Bede, the great English historian writing in the 8th century, tells us that these settlers gave their name to the land. The Latin term Angli referred to these people, and gradually their territories became known as Angleland, or England. The language they spoke evolved into what we call Englisk, or English. But here's where it gets interesting for our story. In medieval Latin, the language of scholarship, law, and the church, the adjective form of Angli became Anglicanus, meaning English or pertaining to the English. This word would lie dormant for centuries, waiting for its moment in history. When Christianity came to England, first with the Celtic missionaries and then more decisively with Augustine of Canterbury's mission in 597 AD, sent by Pope Gregory the Great, the church established in England was simply called the Church in England, or the English Church, in Latin, Ecclesia Anglicana. So here we have our first crucial piece of the puzzle. The term Anglicana, or Anglican, existed for centuries before it became the formal name of a distinct church. It was simply a geographical descriptor. The English Church, part of the Universal Catholic Church, but located in England. For nearly 1,000 years, from the arrival of Augustine until the 16th century, the Church in England existed as part of the Roman Catholic Church. But don't mistake this for a relationship of simple obedience and harmony. The medieval period was marked by constant tension between English monarchs and the papacy in Rome. Who had the right to appoint bishops? Who controlled church lands? To whom did priests owe their ultimate loyalty? The king who ruled the land, or the pope who claimed spiritual authority? These questions sparked conflicts that sometimes turned violent. Think of the murder of Thomas Becket in 1170, struck down by knights in Canterbury Cathedral itself after his disputes with King Henry II over church authority. Or consider the battles over taxation. Should the English Church pay tribute to Rome, or should its wealth remain in England? Medieval English monarchs often bristled under papal authority. They saw the Church in England as, well, English, even while acknowledging Rome's spiritual supremacy. This dual identity, this tension between being English and being Catholic, would eventually snap during the reign of one particular king. But before we get to that pivotal moment, we need to understand something crucial. The Reformation that would split Western Christianity wasn't started by England. It began in Germany with a monk named Martin Luther. In 1517, Luther nailed his 95 Theses to a church door in Wittenberg, challenging Catholic doctrine and papal authority. His ideas spread like wildfire across Europe. Other reformers followed: Huldrych Zwingli in Switzerland, John Calvin in Geneva. Suddenly, being Protestant, protesting against Rome, became not just possible, but fashionable among those hungry for reform. England watched these continental developments with a mixture of interest and alarm. King Henry VIII himself initially opposed Luther, even writing a defense of Catholic sacraments that earned him the title Defender of the Faith from the Pope. How ironic, then, that this same Henry VIII would become the man most associated with breaking England away from Rome. But here's a question we must examine carefully. Did Henry VIII give the Anglican Church its name, or did he simply create the circumstances that allowed an existing term to take on new meaning? The year is 1527. King Henry VIII has a problem. Not just any problem, but one that would reshape English history. His wife, Catherine of Aragon, has not given him a male heir. He's convinced himself that his marriage is cursed, that God disapproves, and he wants an annulment to marry Anne Boleyn. Now, royal annulments weren't unheard of. The Pope had granted them before to other monarchs for various political reasons, but Pope Clement VII found himself in a terrible position. Catherine's nephew was Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, who had recently sacked Rome itself. The Pope couldn't afford to insult the emperor by annulling his aunt's marriage. Henry was refused. What happened next changed everything. Between 1532 and 1534, through a series of parliamentary acts, Henry systematically severed England's ties with Rome. The Act in Restraint of Appeals declared that England was an empire unto itself, not subject to any foreign power, including the Pope. The Act of Supremacy in 1534 declared that the king was the supreme head of the Church of England. Notice what happened here. Henry didn't create a new church. He didn't say, "I'm founding the Anglican Church today." Instead, he asserted that the church already existing in England, the Ecclesia Anglicana, the English church, was independent, and that he, not the Pope, was its head. This is a crucial distinction. Henry saw himself not as a revolutionary, but as a reformer, returning the English Church to what he believed was its proper independent state. He still considered the Church Catholic, just not Roman Catholic. The doctrine remained largely unchanged initially. The Mass was still in Latin, the 7 sacraments were maintained. What changed was authority, not belief. So did Henry give the Anglican Church its name? Not exactly. The term Ecclesia Anglicana had been used for centuries. What Henry did was transform it from a geographical description into a statement of independence. The English Church became the English Church, answerable to England alone. But the story doesn't end with Henry. In fact, the real character of what would become Anglicanism was shaped more by what came after him. When Henry VIII died in 1547, he left behind a religious situation that was, to put it mildly, confused. His son, Edward VI, was only 9 years old, but was surrounded by committed Protestant advisors who saw an opportunity. During Edward's brief 6-year reign, the Church of England underwent rapid Protestantization. Thomas Cranmer, the Archbishop of Canterbury, introduced the Book of Common Prayer, now in English, not Latin. The theology shifted closer to continental Protestantism. Images were removed from churches. Clerical celibacy was ended. The Mass became the communion service. This was when the Church of England truly became Protestant, not just independent. The term Anglican began to mean something distinctly different from Roman Catholic. But then Edward died in 1553, and his half-sister Mary took the throne. Mary was fervently Catholic. Her mother had been Catherine of Aragon, the wife Henry had cast aside. Mary saw it as her divine mission to return England to Rome. For 5 years, Mary tried to turn back the clock. She restored papal authority. She reinstated Catholic practices, and tragically, she burned nearly 300 Protestants at the stake for heresy, earning her the nickname Bloody Mary. Among those executed was Thomas Cranmer himself. It seemed the English Church might cease to be Anglican in any meaningful sense, might simply dissolve back into Roman Catholicism. But then Mary died in 1558, childless and with her religious policies largely unpopular. Enter Elizabeth I, perhaps the most important figure in establishing what Anglican would actually mean. Elizabeth faced an impossible situation. About half her country was Protestant, half was Catholic. Religious civil war loomed. She needed a solution. What Elizabeth crafted was genius in its pragmatism, the Elizabethan settlement of 1559. She re-established royal supremacy over the Church. She restored the Book of Common Prayer, though with modifications that Catholics could potentially tolerate. She kept bishops and traditional church structure, which pleased conservatives, but maintained Protestant theology, which pleased reformers. This middle way, this via media, as it came to be called, became the defining characteristic of Anglicanism. Not quite Catholic, not quite Protestant, but something uniquely English. Elizabeth famously said she did not wish to make men's windows into their souls. She cared about outward conformity and unity, not detailed theological uniformity. Under Elizabeth, Anglican began to mean not just English, but a distinct approach to Christianity, retaining ancient forms while embracing Reformed theology, valuing tradition while accepting change, preferring comprehension over exclusion. It's during and after Elizabeth's reign that we see the term Anglican truly crystallizing as a distinct identity. But here's the fascinating part. The name emerged not from official decree, but from the need to distinguish this English church from others. Think about it. When English theologians debated with Roman Catholics, they needed a term to describe their church that wasn't simply Catholic, since both sides claimed that title. When they encountered continental Protestants, Calvinists, Lutherans, they needed to explain how the Church of England was different from them too. Anglican became that term. It described a church that was Reformed in theology but Catholic in structure, Protestant in doctrine but traditional in worship, governed by bishops but ruled by the monarch, grounded in Scripture but shaped by tradition. The word appeared increasingly in theological writings of the late 16th and early 17th centuries. Scholars would write of Anglican divines or Anglican practices or the Anglican position on various doctrines. It was a term of definition, helping both insiders and outsiders understand what this English church actually was. But here's something crucial. Even as the name Anglican gained currency among theologians and educated clergy, most ordinary English people simply called it the Church of England. They went to their parish church as their ancestors had for centuries. For them, it was just church, their church, England's church. The term Anglican was more commonly used by foreigners describing the English church, or by scholars in academic debate than by ordinary worshippers. It was a name that grew from the outside in, so to speak, rather than being imposed from the top down. This pattern would continue for centuries. Even today, in England, people are more likely to say Church of England than Anglican Church, while globally, especially in former British colonies, Anglican is the preferred term. As Britain built its empire, the Church of England went with it. Chaplains accompanied explorers and colonists. Missionaries followed soldiers and traders. Wherever the Union Jack was raised, Anglican churches were soon built. By the 19th century, Anglican churches existed across 6 continents. There was an Anglican bishop in India, in Australia, in Canada, in Africa. But here's the problem this created. How could you call it the Church of England when it was flourishing in Sydney or Lagos or Hong Kong? This is when Anglican became essential as a term. These churches weren't English, they were Australian, Canadian, Indian, African. Their members weren't English, but they shared a common heritage, liturgy, and structure with the mother church in England. Anglican provided the perfect solution. It acknowledged the English origins while transcending national boundaries. You could be Canadian and Anglican, Nigerian and Anglican, Japanese and Anglican. The name allowed for unity without uniformity, connection without colonialism, at least in theory. In 1867, the First Lambeth Conference brought Anglican bishops from around the world to London. This gathering didn't create a global Anglican church. Anglicanism remains a communion of independent churches, but Anglican became the term for this worldwide family. Today, the Anglican Communion includes 85 million members across 165 countries. The majority are African, not English. The largest Anglican church is in Nigeria, not Britain. Anglican has become truly global, far transcending its English origins. The term that once simply meant English now represents one of the most culturally diverse Christian traditions in the world. So, we return to our original question: who gave the Anglican Church its name? The answer, as we've discovered, is that no single person did. The name Anglican emerged from centuries of history, layer upon layer of meaning accumulating around a simple Latin adjective that meant English. The Germanic Angles gave England its name in the 5th century. Medieval scribes used Anglicana to describe the church in England. Henry VIII separated that church from Rome without renaming it. Elizabeth I gave it a distinct theological character. Scholars and theologians adopted Anglican to describe and define this unique expression of Christianity, and empire spread it worldwide, transforming it from an ethnic descriptor to a global identity. If we had to point to the most crucial period, it would be the Elizabethan era and the decades that followed, when Anglican shifted from meaning simply English to meaning a particular kind of Reformed Catholic Christianity that was neither Roman nor strictly Protestant. But perhaps the most accurate answer is this: history gave the Anglican Church its name. Not a king or a bishop or a council, but the organic process of a people, a nation, and a church defining itself over centuries.